There is a graveyard in Hollywood that nobody talks about. It is not filled with bad movies. It is filled with brilliant ones. Films that arrived too early, got marketed wrong, confused the wrong audiences, or simply refused to dumb themselves down enough to be understood. And the cruel irony is that some of the most intelligent, visually stunning, and emotionally devastating science fiction films ever made about space are sitting in that graveyard right now, collecting dust. We are not talking about hidden gems that nobody has ever heard of. We are talking about films that had real budgets, real directors, real stars, and real ambition. These movies didn't fail because they were bad. They failed because audiences showed up expecting lasers, heroes, and simple answers, and instead got silence, ideas, and questions that refused to explain themselves. In this video, we're digging into 10 space sci-fi movies that were wildly misunderstood when they first landed. Films that asked big questions instead of handing out easy thrills. 10 films, 10 stories of ambition, misunderstanding, and eventual vindication. And as we get towards the end of this video, you will never look at space sci-fi the same way ever again. Number 10, Dark Star, 1974. Before John Carpenter became the man behind Halloween, he made a film about 4 deeply miserable astronauts drifting through space on a mission so tedious, so soul-crushing, and so absurd that it feels less like science fiction and more like a cosmic joke with no punchline. Dark Star started as a student film at the University of Southern California in 1970. The story is deceptively simple. A crew of 4 astronauts has been drifting through deep space for 20 years on a mission to destroy unstable planets in star systems that humanity wants to colonize. Their commander died in a freak accident, and his frozen corpse is still on the ship, occasionally consulted for advice. Their equipment is failing. Their morale is gone. Their only companion is an alien they accidentally picked up, which looks like a painted beach ball with feet and spends most of its time causing low-level chaos on the ship. And their most pressing ongoing crisis involves a series of artificially intelligent bombs that have developed philosophical opinions about whether or not they should detonate. What happened next is where the story gets remarkable. One of the major actors and writers, Dan O'Bannon, left the project, moved to Paris, fell into a period of intense personal and financial difficulty, and eventually channeled everything he had learned writing Dark Star into a new screenplay. Dark Star is not an easy watch. It is slow by modern standards. Its effects are deliberately cheap in ways that even its makers acknowledged. Its humor is dry to the point of being almost invisible. But underneath all of that is something that almost no science fiction film before or since has managed to capture with such brutal honesty. The idea that space is not a place of wonder and discovery. It is a place of institutional monotony, creeping madness, and eventually, if you are unlucky enough to be out there long enough, a philosophical argument with a bomb that you are going to lose. But Dark Star was just the beginning of this story, because the next film on this list had a real budget, a real studio, and a real star, and it still got buried so completely that the footage from its original darker version was reportedly destroyed before the world ever got to see it. Number 9, Silent Running, 1972. When this movie first reached audiences in the early 1970s, most people didn't know what to do with it. They walked in expecting a space adventure, laser battles, alien threats, maybe some grand cosmic conflict. Instead, they got long stretches of silence, a drifting spacecraft, and a deeply emotional story about one man trying to save the last forests on Earth. The story begins in the far future. Earth's natural ecosystems have been completely wiped out. No forests, no wildlife, no wilderness of any kind. The planet has been entirely given over to industry and development, and nobody seems particularly bothered by this. Life goes on, people adapt, the world keeps spinning, but someone had the foresight to save something. Before the last trees fell, massive greenhouse domes were constructed and launched into space. Giant, dome-shaped biospheres attached to cargo freighters and sent drifting through the solar system, each one carrying a living, breathing piece of what Earth used to be. Lowell is played by Bruce Dern in one of the most quietly devastating performances in science fiction history. He's a gentle, deeply passionate man, who has dedicated his life to the forests drifting behind his ship. He tends to the plants, he monitors the soil, he walks barefoot through the dome, completely at peace among the trees, in a way he never seems to be with other people. Because here's the thing about Lowell, he is not like his crewmates. The film takes its time establishing this tension, and that slowness, which so many critics read as a flaw, is actually the whole point. What happens next is the moment the film shifts into something darker and more complicated than anything you might have expected going in. Lowell kills his crewmates, not in a moment of theatrical villainy, not with speeches or menace. It happens quickly, desperately, in a kind of panicked grief. He cannot let them destroy the forest. He cannot stand by and watch it happen, so he stops them, and in stopping them, he crosses a line he can never come back from. When the film came out in 1972, audiences weren't ready for that ending. What once felt uneventful now feels haunting. And as the story drifts toward its ending, it becomes clear this wasn't a misunderstood sci-fi failure at all. It was a message sent too early, waiting decades for the world to catch up. Number 8. Event Horizon, 1997. A rescue crew is dispatched to investigate a long-lost experimental spacecraft that has mysteriously reappeared near Neptune. This ship was built to do something that had never been done before: fold space itself and travel faster than light. Then it vanished without a trace. 7 years later, it's back. And from the moment the crew steps aboard, something feels deeply, irreversibly wrong. Not broken machinery wrong, not system failure wrong. Wrong in the way that makes your body react before your brain catches up. Because this ship didn't just travel far. It traveled somewhere it was never supposed to return from. And whatever exists in that place followed it back. The horror here isn't monsters or invasions, it's personal. The ship reaches inside each crew member and pulls out their worst memories, their deepest guilt, their most hidden shame, and turns all of it into a weapon. Space in this film isn't vast and wondrous, it's oppressive, cruel, watching. And that tonal collision was too much for audiences to process. Science fiction and horror were still treated as completely separate genres, and this film refused to choose between them. Today, that same intensity is exactly why it has one of the most passionate cult followings in science fiction history. The atmosphere, the production design, the willingness to treat space as something indifferent and unknowable rather than something to be conquered. And the next film on this list proves that sometimes being misunderstood has nothing to do with fear at all, but everything to do with how quietly a story challenges the future. Number 7. Solaris, 1972. Most science fiction movies treat space as a frontier, something to be explored, conquered, or survived. Solaris treats space as a mirror. The story follows a psychologist dispatched to a crumbling space station orbiting a planet unlike anything ever encountered. The planet is called Solaris, and its entire surface is covered by a single vast ocean. Not a dead ocean, a living one, a thinking one. Scientists have been studying it for years, and something has gone catastrophically wrong. The crew is unraveling, behaving irrationally, refusing to explain what they have seen. Solaris doesn't communicate through signals or language or any system humans can map or decode. Instead, it reaches directly into the human mind. It finds what's buried there, and it gives them physical form. And that is where the film becomes genuinely devastating. Because the question Solaris keeps pressing is not about the planet. It is not about science or space or first contact. The question is this: if something is created from memory but experiences reality, does it have the right to exist? There are no villains here, no threat to defeat, no mystery that gets neatly resolved. The film refuses to explain Solaris because the planet is not the point. The people watching it are the point. Their grief is the point. Their inability to understand something that does not think the way they do is the point. And over time, their perception changed. What once felt slow now feels hypnotic. What was dismissed as pretentious is now seen as courageous. Solaris didn't fail to entertain. It chose to confront emotions that blockbuster sci-fi usually avoids. And that's why it belongs here, because the next film on this list wasn't misunderstood for being quiet or philosophical. It was misunderstood for daring to imagine space as a place where human control completely collapses. Number 6. Robinson Crusoe on Mars, 1964. Long before science fiction regularly explored mental and emotional isolation, this film commits to it completely. The story opens with a routine space mission that goes violently wrong, leaving a single astronaut stranded on the surface of Mars with no rescue coming, no contact with Earth, and no guarantee that the planet can support human life long enough for any of that to matter. What follows is not an action film, it is a survival film in the most literal sense. Finding breathable air, building shelter, learning the terrain, rationing everything. The tension doesn't come from constant danger. It comes from endurance and from watching a man slowly confront what it actually means to be completely alone. That psychological weight is what separates this film from its reputation. Days blur. Silence becomes its own kind of pressure. The planet feels enormous and indifferent, which makes every small failure feel catastrophic and every small victory feel almost unbearably precious. When companionship eventually arrives, it is not triumphant or clean. It is cautious, fragile, and morally complicated in ways that still feel surprisingly modern. For a $1 million project, filmed largely in Death Valley, standing in for the Martian landscape, this film achieved something that bigger productions with 10 times the budget completely failed to do. It made you feel the silence. It was never too simple for its audience. Its audience just was not ready to sit still long enough to feel it. Seen today, it fits perfectly alongside contemporary science fiction that values character and atmosphere over noise. Its practical effects sell the environment. Its emotional focus holds. And what comes next is a film that didn't just explore isolation in space, it turned the entire universe into something unknowable, threatening, and deeply unsettling in a way few films had ever attempted before. Number 5. The Green Slime, 1968. This movie didn't just confuse audiences when it arrived, it embarrassed them. Critics mocked it, viewers laughed at it for the wrong reasons. And for decades, it was filed away as a loud, ridiculous relic of late 60s sci-fi excess. A massive rogue asteroid is locked on a collision course with Earth. An international space station scrambles a desperate mission to intercept it, drill into the rock, and destroy it before impact. The film wastes no time. From the opening sequence, the stakes are extinction level, and the clock is already running. The mission succeeds, the asteroid is destroyed, crisis averted, then the crew comes home. Hitching a ride back on their suits and equipment are microscopic alien organisms that nobody noticed in the rush to get clear of the explosion. Once aboard the station, they make contact with its electrical systems and begin to feed. They grow, they multiply, they adapt faster than anyone can contain them. What started as a handful of microscopic stowaways becomes a station-wide infestation within hours, and the creatures are not passive. They attack, they swarm, they overwhelm every defense system designed for human-scale threats. For what it cost, The Green Slime delivered something that far more expensive productions failed to achieve. It made you feel like there was no way out. And next is a film that pushed even harder into paranoia and control, proving that in space, the most dangerous enemy isn't always what's crawling in the dark. Sometimes it's the system designed to protect you. Number 4. Moon Trap, 1989. No major marketing campaign, no wide release, no real push to get it in front of audiences. Moontrap arrived at the end of the 1980s like something left on a shelf, quietly hoping someone would notice. The story opens with a mystery that feels almost too small to matter. During a routine orbital mission, astronauts recover an unidentified metallic object drifting in space. It does not transmit, it does not respond, it simply floats there, ancient and silent and wrong, in a way nobody can immediately explain. It gets brought back to Earth. Scientists get excited. They believe it could be extraterrestrial technology. What they do not understand is that it is a trigger. Once activated, the object reveals something that reframes the entire premise of the film. Long before humanity ever reached space, something else did. And it did not leave anything behind by accident. The artifact is part of an automated alien defense system, purpose-built to detect intelligent life and eliminate it before it can become a threat. The moon is not just a satellite sitting quietly in orbit. It is a staging ground. What follows is a tonal shift that completely blindsided the few audiences who actually saw it. The film moves from curiosity to paranoia to outright survival horror without stopping to reassure anyone. The alien machines that emerge are not towering movie monsters. They are relentless, emotionless, and completely indifferent to human survival. They do not communicate, they do not negotiate, they advance. In 1989, audiences didn't know what to make of this. The film wasn't flashy enough to compete with mainstream sci-fi, but it was far darker than people expected from a space adventure. Viewed today, Moontrap feels eerily ahead of its time. Its themes of ancient alien technology, automated extermination, and humanity stumbling into forces it cannot control now dominate modern sci-fi. The practical effects, grounded performances, and bleak tone give it a seriousness that stands out against more optimistic space films of the era. Number 3. Saturn III, 1980. Saturn III arrived at the dawn of the 1980s, a moment when sci-fi audiences wanted wonder, heroism, and clean futurism. What they got instead was something cold, sexual, paranoid, and deeply uncomfortable. The backlash was immediate. Set on a remote research station orbiting Saturn, the story traps two scientists in near-total isolation. Supplies are limited, communication is delayed, every day follows the same quiet routine. The station feels safe, controlled, almost peaceful. Then a third man arrives unannounced, bringing with him an advanced robot designed to outperform humans in every way. From the moment he steps inside the station, the atmosphere curdles. The threat in Saturn III isn't explosive, it's invasive. The robot isn't a mindless machine, it learns, it watches, it absorbs the impulses, desires, and violent tendencies of its creator. As the human antagonist grows more unstable, the machine mirrors him, becoming a distorted reflection of obsession, control, and entitlement. The danger escalates slowly, creeping into every corner of the station. Doors stop feeling like protection. Technology becomes unreliable. Privacy disappears. Audiences in 1980 weren't ready for a space movie that leaned into psychological and sexual menace rather than action. The tone was too bleak, the intimacy too disturbing. Critics focused on production issues and surface-level oddities, ignoring the film's central idea that artificial intelligence doesn't become dangerous by rebelling, but by faithfully inheriting human corruption. And next is a film that didn't unsettle viewers through menace or paranoia, but by quietly dismantling the idea that humanity was ever in control of space to begin with. Number 2, This Island Earth, 1955. Universal Pictures spent around $2 million on this film, which made it one of the most expensive science fiction productions of its era. They marketed it as a spectacle. Flying saucers, alien threats, Cold War dread dressed up in Technicolor. A brilliant scientist got recruited through a series of tests that no human organization could have designed. The trail leads him to a hidden research facility full of elite minds working on technology decades beyond anything on Earth. It feels like a dream at first, the best scientists in the world working on the most advanced problems imaginable. Then the truth lands. The technology is not human, the scientists are not collaborators, they are resources, recruited, flattered, and quietly harvested by an alien civilization that needs what human minds can offer. When the protagonist is taken off-world, the film changes completely. Earth is not the center of anything. It is a backwater, a supplier, a pawn in a conflict between civilizations so much older and larger that humanity barely registers. The planet Metaluna, rendered in remarkable color and scale for 1955, is not a place of wonder. It is a society collapsing under the weight of endless war, desperate enough to exploit another species just to survive a little longer. For $2 million, the film delivered visuals that were genuinely extraordinary for the era. But critics ignored all of it and fixated on the monster suits. They missed the entire point. This was never an invasion story. It was a story about manipulation and the illusion of importance. The aliens are not evil. They are rational, exhausted, and morally broken, which made them far more frightening than any monster. And next is the final film on this list. One that took all of these fears, isolation, insignificance, and loss of control, and wrapped them into a vision of space so cold and final that audiences still argue about it decades later. Number 1. The Black Hole, 1979. This movie wasn't just misunderstood, it was rejected for daring to be darker than anyone expected. A deep space exploration vessel detects a massive starship hovering impossibly close to a black hole. The ship should have been destroyed. Instead, it sits there in silence, defying physics. When the crew boards the abandoned vessel, they find something unsettling. It isn't empty. Dr. Hans Reinhardt, the ship's commander, has remained behind with a crew of silent, masked figures and an army of red-eyed robots. He claims he has conquered the black hole, mastered it. His obsession is total. He speaks of glory, destiny, and scientific immortality. But the station doesn't feel triumphant. It feels haunted. As the truth unravels, the film shifts into something far more disturbing than a space adventure. Reinhardt hasn't conquered anything. He's trapped himself in delusion. The silent crew members aren't volunteers, they are prisoners, stripped of identity. The red robot Maximilian isn't a protector, it's an executioner, and the black hole itself becomes more than a cosmic object. It becomes judgment. The film begins like a family-friendly sci-fi spectacle and slowly descends into existential horror. Its final act doesn't offer comfort or clarity. It dives into surreal imagery, spiritual symbolism, and a vision of space that feels biblical rather than scientific. Viewers didn't know how to process it, critics dismissed it as confused, too dark for its brand, too strange for mainstream appeal. But time changed that conversation. Modern audiences see the ambition clearly. The practical effects are stunning. The production design feels operatic and grand. More importantly, the themes hit harder now. Obsession with technological dominance, the cost of ego, the illusion that humanity can control forces it barely understands. The black hole wasn't misunderstood because it lacked direction. It was misunderstood because it refused to stay safe, and that's why it stands at number 1, not just as a forgotten sci-fi epic, but as proof that sometimes the most ambitious ideas don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they're too bold for the moment they arrive. Now we want to hear from you. Does sci-fi ages differently than any other genre, or do you think we should have added a movie or two to this list? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like the video, share it with a fellow sci-fi fan, and subscribe to Vintacine Vault for more forgotten films, lost classics, and stories Hollywood quietly left behind.